the power of sacrifice. Jesus told us to die to ourselves and to walk in spirit with God. Without dying to ourselves, the fleshy nature, will always desire the things of the flesh. And the things of the flesh are always opposing to the ways of God. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 8 verse 7, a mind that is governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's ways, and nor can it do so. And so you can't walk in the flesh and walk in spirit with God at the same time, because the two are opposites. They're opposite to one another. They disagree. They're not in alignment. The Bible tells us in Galatians chapter 5 verse 17, the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God, what is contrary to the flesh, they are in conflict with one another, so that you are not to do what you want to do. The ways of the flesh and the ways of God are opposite, and the Bible tells us don't do what you want to do. You know, you get a lot of worldly teachings out there that say, just do what makes you happy, just be yourself, just do what you want to do. No, the Bible's saying no. Because when we do follow those false teachings and we go out and we do what we want, what makes us happy, we're going to follow the desires of the flesh, the fleshy nature. And the Bible tells us that the flesh is the opposite to the ways of God. In other words, the world is teaching you to walk in a way that is contrary to God. And so this is why Jesus says, die to yourself and walk with God. We have to die to ourselves. The desires of the flesh, the carnal mind, walking in the ways of this world, the sinful ways of Satan. Jesus says, die to yourself and walk with God. You know, maybe God tells you to disconnect from a specific person. A person that God knows is not good for you. And God's telling you to disconnect from this person. But you've been around that person for so long, so it's painful for you to do that. It's hard, it hurts to do so. But that's what sacrifice is. Maybe God is telling you to stop doing drugs. But you've been doing drugs for so long and it's painful to go through that withdrawal period. It's painful when it hurts and it's hard. But that's what sacrifice is. Maybe God is telling you to stop lying, to stop stealing. But that's how you were brought up. That's all you know. It's hard. How can I change now? It's hard. It's difficult. It's painful. But that's what sacrifice is. Maybe God is telling you to let go of a certain way of thinking. You say, but that's how I've been thinking all of my life. It's hard to change. It's hard to change your mental patterns. It's hard to change your conditioning, your programming. But that's what sacrifice is. Nobody said that sacrifice is going to be easy, although sometimes it might be. Maybe God is telling you to leave a certain job. And then you start to get anxious and worried. Well, how will I provide? How will I put food on the table? How will I pay for my expenses? And so on and so forth. But that's what sacrifice is. It will be different for everybody. If God's telling you to leave a certain job, the process of leaving that job might be different to the process of somebody else leaving that job. Or when God tells you to leave a certain relationship, it might be different to the process of somebody else leaving a certain relationship. Whatever the process is, whatever it looks like, when God tells you to do something, you have to do it, because that's what sacrifice is. Jesus died to himself. Look at his sacrifice. Look at where Jesus is now. He's sitting at the right hand of God. So when the Bible tells you to die to yourself, it's not to stress you, it's not to torture you, it's not to bring bad things upon you. It's always for your own good. You take a seed, an apple seed, an orange seed, a lemon seed, whatever it is. Take a seed. you plant it in soil. That seed has to die to itself before it can produce the full plant. You see, the seed goes in the soil and it completely gets destroyed. It completely comes apart. It's completely destroyed. The seed doesn't exist anymore. The seed has to not exist before the plant can grow. While the seed is still intact, the plant can't grow. So you put the seed in the soil, it has to completely get destroyed in that soil, open up until it is no longer a seed. The seed no longer exists. It's died. It's dead before that plant can grow. When Jesus tells you die to yourself, it's not because he wants to torture you, give you a hard time. It's because until you die to yourself, you cannot grow into what God has for you, the person that God has for you, the person that you can be in God, walk in the ways of God. You can't do that. You have to die to yourself. And Jesus came and he showed us how it's done. Spiritually dying to yourself. In other words, it was no longer about him. Jesus wasn't on the cross saying, oh, I'm in pain. Oh, I have this. Oh, I have that. I don't want to. I don't know how to. He said to the Father, Father, if you can take this cup from me, take it, but your will be done, not mine. Jesus at any time could have called a number of angels down to take him down from that cross, but he didn't. Why? Because he was dying to himself. I don't care what the pain is. I don't care what the thoughts are. I don't care what this is. I don't care if I'm right. I don't care if I'm wrong. I don't care if I'm in agony. I don't care if it's difficult. I don't care if it's a painful process. I don't care if I'm uncomfortable. I don't care if I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. That's what it means, dying to yourself. In other words, the self is no longer in the middle. Because God tells you, leave that abusive relationship. You say, yeah, but you notice the I is always in the middle. I, me. But I'm uncomfortable. This is all I've ever known. I don't know how. I'm not good enough. And then Jesus says, die to that I. Die to that self. Because when you die to yourself, God tells you get out of that relationship. There is no self to oppose. There is no self to say, well, I don't want to. So God tells you get out of that relationship, you get out. God tells you take this path, you take that path. God tells you don't take that path, you don't take that path. The I is not in the middle to oppose. You see, Jesus died to himself. We need to look at his sacrifice. At the same time, what was Jesus saying? He loved everyone. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It wasn't about him to hold the grudge, to hate that person. Why did they do that to me? It wasn't about him because he had died to himself. His self wasn't anywhere in the picture. Only then can you be fully what God has called you to be. Only then. You can't do it any other way. Because the flesh will always be in the middle doing what is opposing to God. So you need to ask yourself, are you giving up something that satisfies your flesh so that you can strengthen in spirit? Are you giving up something that satisfies your flesh so that you can walk in spirit with God? Or are you allowing the flesh to overpower? So then you can't walk in spirit with God. Then you can't strengthen your spirit. No one's saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard. Sometimes. Sometimes it might not. But you need to keep your focus on Jesus. Throughout this entire process, keep your focus on Jesus. Keep walking toward God. Keep your mind on Jesus, and you will notice that the pain lessens until eventually it goes away. And then it's normal to you to live a sacrificial life where you have died to yourself. And you're walking in the ways with God. You're walking in spirit with God. It all boils down to one thing: choosing God over the flesh. It all boils down to one thing. When you choose the flesh over God, that's when you have problems. You see, a drug addict has that addiction because he chooses the flesh over God. Drunkenness is because they choose the flesh over God. Lying is because they choose the flesh over God. Pride, manipulation, control, superiority, ego, hate, jealousy, murder, fornication, adultery, idolatry, all of these things are because they choose the flesh over God. If they chose God over the flesh, those things wouldn't exist, because those are the things of the flesh. So when Jesus says die to yourself, it's not just, it's because there's a reason. There's a reason you need to die to yourself. It's for your own good. So it all boils down to choosing God over the flesh. The Bible says in Matthew chapter 10 verse 39, he who finds his life will lose it. And he who loses his life for my sake will find it. Let me read that again. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. So in other words, pick up your cross every single day. Pick up your cross and walk every single day. The cross is about death. The cross is about dying to yourself. Pick up your cross every single day and walk. You need to willingly die to yourself to follow Jesus Christ. You need to willingly die to yourself if you are going to find life. Because Jesus says, I am the life. So you need to willingly die to yourself to follow Christ. Otherwise, if you don't willingly die to yourself, I promise you, you're in spiritual death. These people think that they're alive. They're the walking dead. They think that they're free. They're in bondage. They're not happy. None of that. They think that's freedom. Walking in the ways of this world, they think it's freedom. They think it's life. They think it's this, that, or the other. It's not. It's death. They can't see it. That's what deception is. He who finds his life will lose it. And he who loses his life for my sake will find it. You see, when you deny yourself to follow Christ, you will find life. Otherwise, you won't. And that's just how it is. And so, are you willing to choose God over your flesh, over your insecurities, over I can't do that, over wanting to stay in your comfort zone, over your desires, your intentions, your ambitions, your appetites? Are you willing to choose God over all of that? That's what sacrifice is. Now, don't get me wrong. Maybe you're not in a bad place. Maybe you're not around people that are bad for you, but God wants you somewhere else. It could be that. That's what sacrifice is. But because you're so comfortable in your home, because you're so comfortable in that workplace, because you're so comfortable with your friends, because you're so comfortable with those desires, because you're so comfortable with this, you don't want change. That's not sacrifice. Because sacrifice is to choose God. You see, Jesus, before he came down in the flesh, born of the Virgin Mary, which is a miracle of God, he was sitting at the right hand of God. He could have chosen to stay there. You know, I'm sitting at the right hand of God. I have everything I need. I don't need to move. I'm happy where I am here. I don't need to go down there with all that sin to die, to be spat on, to be accused, to be accused falsely. But he didn't think of himself. He didn't think of himself, so he came down to be the example, to show us this is what sacrifice is. He didn't have to. He already had everything he wanted up there, sitting at the right hand of God. But he didn't think about himself. He came down to show us the way, to go through all of that pain, all of that suffering, to show us the way. That's what sacrifice is. So God might be telling you to leave that person, or do this, or get out of that job, or change location, or whatever it is, or change that way of thinking, or change that job, or whatever it is. Let go of that, do this, let go of the other. You're so comfortable in there. Like Jesus was so comfortable sitting at the right hand of God. He didn't have to come down, but he did. Because you're so comfortable in these places, you say, I don't want to leave. I don't want to change. I don't want to do that. That's not sacrifice. If anyone should have said, I don't want to leave, I'm comfortable where I am, it should have been Jesus, as he was sitting at the right hand of God. But he didn't. He came down to show you how it's done. So the question is, are you willing to choose God? Are you willing to choose God over the flesh? And that's what sacrifice is. Now, for those of you who do not already know, my next book, titled From New Age Occult to Jesus Christ, will be published in a few days, so stay tuned for that. For those of you who have not already purchased my book, Who is God? You can purchase that below. Donations to my ministry can be made below. If you need prayers or deliverance, contact us using the information below. God bless you. Peace be with you.